Notwithstanding some of the economic sore points that will dominate the summit, the Canadian hosts will want the discussion to turn to Canada's priorities: growth and gender equality, trade deals that work for everyone, and international development. I spoke recently with Canada's Minister of International Development about Canada's summit priorities. Minister Bibeau, first of all, thanks for coming in to speak with me.
It's my pleasure.
It's good to see you again. Investing in growth that works for everyone, it's one of the key themes, as we know, of the G7 summit. What specific ideas, what specific proposals will Canada be putting before the G7 leaders?
Well, as you know, I'm very interested in the international development, and the thing is really to bring women and girls around the table, and especially adolescent girls. So for our G7, we will listen directly from adolescent girls from Canada, from an Indigenous, representing one of the Indigenous community, and adolescent girls coming from developing countries. So this is also something that we want to bring to the leaders, the importance of taking into consideration the fact that when we talk about education, for example, we really have to think about the full life cycle of a girl, of an adolescent, because the thing is, if we want to have growth that benefits to everyone, if we want to have empowered women, then we have to take into consideration the whole life cycle of her life, from being a girl, adolescent, and then a woman.
And we also know that, I mean, G7 leaders are going to be dealing with, as they have before, the whole idea of trade, and trade that works for everyone. We know the kind of pushback we've seen around the world from people who don't feel that the trade deals have treated everybody fairly, and that's an important context too, isn't it? In terms of who gets treated unfairly is often women and girls in these trade deals.
Absolutely. And so we want to support, and we want to support women entrepreneurs, and it will be one of the subject of discussion when we, the Minister of Development, will meet with the Minister of Finance. This will be one of our main topic. How can we make sure that our contribution through bilateral programs, but as well through multilateral and international financing institution, that women get their a fair share of this financing, that they have the tools to access this financing as well. So talking about training, but also, really having access to financing and to the value chain.
Not all countries share Canada's view on this in terms of attaching issues such as gender inequality to things like trade deals and multilateral funding to different organizations and different causes and different programs. Do you think we'll see some of that at the summit, that there would be some resistance to an agenda that says we have to lift up women and girls in order to have growth that works for everyone?
I mean, this decision is really based on evidence. I've been through a very important consultation. I've been traveling a lot. Yes, it came as obvious from this conversation, but it's also based on evidence. And if it has been demonstrated, and there's a study showing that if each country would reach the level of gender equality of the best one in its region, then it would mean $12 trillion additional to the global GDP by 2025. It's huge what women can contribute if they have access to financing, access to the value chain, and really participate fully in the economy of their respective countries and regions.
G7 countries account for about 75% of the world's development aid and 81% of the humanitarian aid, and yet underfunding continues to be a problem. There doesn't seem to be enough money. So I know Canada is really pushing the idea of finding ways to leverage the private sector and philanthropic groups and so on to try and boost the amount of aid that goes to these developing countries. What's the plan?
What's the plan? Well, ODA, Official Development Assistance, so the money coming from government donors, represent more or less $142 billion. If we want to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, by 2030, we would have to invest, depending on the city, we're talking about trillions of dollars every year. So we definitely have to maintain our official development assistance, but find new friends to invest. So the private sector is obviously one. In terms of of investing in business, growing the economy, creating jobs, yes. Last Friday, actually, we made a call to action to the private sector, but more on the philanthropy side, because I have had many requests from philanthropists wanted to follow to join the Canadian leadership in this area in supporting or defending women's rights. So we are willing to put up to $300 million to bring, to be leveraged, I would say, by the philanthropists. So there are different ways to find new contributors if we want to end poverty, and we as Canada, we want to bring new financing partners to support women empowerment in different ways.
What's the message to the private sector, though? I mean, private companies invest where there's money to be made, where there's profit to be made. So what's the incentive for them to invest in a developing country in programs such as the ones that you're talking about to help encourage better opportunities for women and girls?
We have different channels, obviously. So it could be really doing business and making sure that the impact on the development around in the communities where the business is being done will be done in a way that it take into consideration the needs of the women and the community around. It could be really investing in businesses owned by women. So there are different, and it could be also through the philanthropy, really supporting local women's organizations who are really defending their rights. So there are different channels. When we think about the pension funds, for example, they are making investment and thinking in long term. So they might be a very significant partner in that. So we are at the stage, we are having discussion with such type of financing institution to see how they would be interested in investing in funds, social bonds or gender bonds. So there are so many discussions, but while we are getting there, we have to support women to provide training so they can have finance capabilities in terms of financing. So we are really at the stage of getting women ready also to benefit from different type of financing.
Right. So is Canada's approach one that you expect will be adopted by the G7 leaders?
Yes, and I mean, we can be all working together for a common objective, because I think all the G7 recognize the importance of women economic empowerment for the benefit of the world, actually. The way we get there, so this is the idea when we are all sitting together to challenge our views, to learn lessons from others, and to find the ways that will have the greater impact in the field.
But do you expect from the summit to actually come these concrete plans set out by leaders about how they're going to make change, or do you expect it to be the beginning of a conversation that will continue?
It depends on the subject, actually. So, because through the G7 for the International Development Minister, we will be also talking about humanitarian assistance, how we can be more gender transformative. So, yes, I believe that on some of the subjects we will reach an agreement, and we will commit to best practices to really have more impact. This is always what we want. And in other sector, it will be a work in progress.
Let's finish on this. Canada's really, we've talked about it, is pushing an agenda of trade, of economic empowerment, of programs that helps an economy work for everybody, and we've talked about that. It's an agenda of multilateralism. It's an agenda of support for developing countries. But there will be one leader at the summit who kind of does his own thing, and that's Donald Trump. And he may not agree with a lot of the ways that Canada wants to pursue these. He has different objectives. He seems to be closing off America rather than opening it up to multilateralist approaches. Are you concerned that some of the objectives you have for the summit either get stalled or derailed by President Trump?
I think we have the same ultimate objectives on many things. The ways to get there are different in some cases. So the idea of having this honest conversation being among, a small group, it's the best way to try to build on the best approach, best practices. And I mean, we all have our values and our priorities, but ultimately we all agree that we want to make the world a better world. We want to be more peaceful, more prosperous. So different ways to get there, but working on the same ultimate objective.
All right. Marie-Claude Bibeau, thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Merci.